Welcome to Focus on Africa. I'm Sophie Kenya in Nairobi. Funerals have taken place in eastern DRC following violence last week that killed more than 30 people. The final stretch for Kenyan political candidates as the country gears for general elections next Tuesday. Also in the program, Peter will be here with all the sports news. It's day 8 at the Commonwealth Games, with African countries moving up on the medals table. Thanks for joining us on the program. Funerals have taken place of 10 protesters killed during violence in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo last week. Among the victims laid to rest in the city of Goma was an 11-year-old child. More than 30 people, including several United Nations peacekeepers, died in the unrest. The violence started during demonstrations against the UN force, that's MONUSCO, with local people accused of failing to protect them against rebel groups operating in the area. MONUSCO denied that claim. The BBC's Joyce Etutu is in Goma and has more on that story.
The people here in Goma are still angered by the presence of the UN. 10 days ago, violent anti-UN protests erupted in the city. Today, 10 of those who were killed during these protests were laid to rest at the Stadium of Unity. Most of those who lost their lives were under the age of 30, with the youngest being an 11-year-old child. Thousands attended the funeral, where the South African song "Freedom is Coming Tomorrow" was played. The funeral was then followed by a procession through the streets of Goma. Religious leaders asked for peace and justice in remembrance of those who lost their lives, calling them true heroes. The ceremony comes just days after a burial service was held for 4 UN peacekeepers who were also killed during the protests. Now, there's been disagreement over who shot the protesters. Activists say MONUSCO opened fire on unarmed civilians, whereas MONUSCO accuses protesters of snatching weapons from Congolese police and opening fire. MONUSCO has been operating in this part of the DRC for more than a decade and is the second largest peacekeeping mission in the world. However, some people in Goma say despite their presence, there is still no peace or stability, and that they would much rather find solutions to the country's problems on their own. Tensions between MONUSCO and the DRC have reached an all-time high, and the country's president, Felix Tshisekedi, has called for his government to act quickly in removing MONUSCO from the country. Earlier this week, MONUSCO's Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General, Kasim Dean, told the BBC that the UN's peacekeeping mission will be evaluated. Mr. Dean added that a gradual and responsible transition plan will be set out in the eastern DRC.
That's Joyce Etutu reporting from Goma, eastern DRC. Now, Kenya is getting ready for one of its most contested presidential elections in recent years. The country's deputy president, who fell out with the current leader, Uhuru Kenyatta, is going against a former opposition candidate and long-standing politician, Raila Odinga. The country is going through a difficult time amidst a cost of living crisis, but Kenyans are also keen to know who will deal with the country's long-standing problem of corruption. The BBC's senior Africa correspondent, Ansoi, reports from Nairobi.
Flaunting financial might on Kenya's campaign trail. Here, politicians pull out all stops to gather and show off the largest crowds. A contest of campaign might, with many cheering them on. Hardly any questions are asked about its cost and how come politicians pull huge crowds every day of the week for months, if not longer.
Bottom.
That politicians pay people to attend the rallies is a foregone conclusion.
All the different groupings in our political firmament are tainted by corruption in one way or the other.
John Githongo went into exile in 2005 after exposing corruption within government.
Corruption now is far worse than it was then. At the time, I was looking at contracts worth about $800 million. That is peanuts to what is being misappropriated, especially over the last 10 years.
If you get elected, despite his misgivings about politicians on both sides, he has joined former Prime Minister Raila Odinga's campaign. The 77-year-old is making a fifth and final attempt to become president.
Nobody is indispensable in this war against corruption.
When you were in government, your office, the office of the Prime Minister, was investigated over some corruption scandals.
The name of the office of the Prime Minister was mentioned that it was under investigations. But there's no evidence that anybody in the office of the Prime Minister did any wrong.
He is running on a platform of fighting corruption and has promised to give $50 a month stipends to poor families. His main opponent, Deputy President William Ruto, is also promising to deal with corruption. He has promised bottom-up economics and uses the slogan "Hustler" that seems to have struck a chord with the smallest of traders.
You know, politics in Kenya has been around people who have brands. Either your father was this or your father was that. I can tell you, my father was not even a headman in our village.
But questions have been asked about his meteoric rise in politics and personal wealth. The president has accused him of corruption and asked people to instead back the former prime minister. To Mr. Ruto, this is dynasties fighting against the son of a nobody. The current administration has invested massively in infrastructure, like this expressway, some of the largest projects since independence, and it's borrowed heavily to finance them.
We're literally caving under the high level of public debt in the country. But we know that what has also made the public debt levels rise is corruption. If we continue to have those corrupt people, or people with questionable integrity, ethics, and characters in office, it means we'll always struggle with in terms of ring-fencing our resources, from pilferage.
This election has the same old faces in new political outfits. But whoever wins, voters do not expect much will change. And with such opulence on the campaign trail, it's hard to see how Kenya's next leader can control corruption or even attempt to end it. Anne Soy, BBC News, Nairobi.
Well, this election is being watched keenly by countries in Africa. Kenya plays a key role in trade and conflict resolution, especially within the East African region. So let's bring in Dr. Hassan Kanenje from the Horn Institute for Strategic Studies. That's a policy think tank. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. How crucial do you think these elections will be, both within the region and across the continent?
I think this is going to be the most consequential event taking place on the African continent, in part because Kenya is not only economic and political anchor state within the region, but it's often considered as a bellwether state, especially when it comes to liberal democracy, as well as issues of governance. And so what happens in Kenya is going to be very important, not just to the region, but to the entire continent.
When you say, what did you say? You said something about better weather friends.
No.
Can you break that down for us?
Yes, it's a bellwether. It sets the trend. It's a trend setter. And
exactly.
so what happens here has a predictive value when it comes to how other parts, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, may actually be able to deal with issues of democracy and governance.
Mm-hmm. Now, Kenya has played quite a key role in various conflict resolutions across the continent. We're talking about DRC at the moment. We're talking about Ethiopia. There is Somalia next door. How do you think, or do you think these two leaders that are currently going head-to-head at the moment in Kenya will continue with it? Do you think they will? Do you think they're interested in continuing with this kind of trend that was started?
Without doubt, Kenya has been a diplomatic leader in this region for much of the last 30 years. We do not expect that the fundamentals of Kenya's foreign policy are going to change. But I think because of the differences in terms of age and experience, as well as philosophy, there is going to be a difference in terms of form as well as style, but the fundamentals are going to remain the same.
When you talk about experience and form, what exactly do you mean? I mean, I know you're trying to compare the two main candidates here. Yes. Who are you talking about?
I think to be more precise, the leadership, especially of Azimio Raila Odinga, is much well known around the continent, has much more experience, especially in dealing with the African leaders, and it may perhaps be easier for him to be able to deal with African leaders as opposed, let's say, to William Ruto, who may be coming in with perhaps new philosophies, but it may take some time for him to learn his ways around. So there is a contest here between the known and the unknown. And so the known on the continent is Raila Odinga, the unknown is William Ruto.
Do you think there should be new strategies in the way, say, for example, Kenya approaches regional issues? Like, I mean, if it's about conflict resolution for the moment.
I don't think there should be a fundamental shift. I think what needs to be there is a clear approach, especially to regional issues. Kenya also is surrounded by neighbors that literally are going through a crisis. You have the conflict in Tigray and Ethiopia. You have a stalemate in terms of civilian-military relationship in Sudan. You have completed business in South Sudan. And of course, you have Somalia just came out of an election. And so Kenya's more robust engagement, I think, is going to be critical. And that is why these elections are fundamentally important. Successful election in Kenya is going to not just send a good message to the region, but a good message to the rest of the continent in so far as Kenya's capacity to be able to be a regional leader diplomatically and economically is concerned.
What, in your opinion, would be the repercussions of an unstable kind of election, so to speak, or an election that is deemed to be unstable or destabilizing a country for that matter? For the region, that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
The challenge, especially considering Kenya's place, is anything that happens in Kenya tends to have a multiplier effect. So a positive thing is going to have a multiplier effect positively, and the inverse is also true. The inverse is also true. I would explain that a little. Because if the election, for instance, doesn't go very well, it's going to affect the entire region, both in terms of economics, in part because this is the economic hub of the region, but also diplomatically, and especially when it comes to the declining democracy witnessed in the region. I think a successful election, especially in Kenya, is going to send a very positive message with regard to liberal democracy as well as good governance. How do you think the issue of climate change, because it's also been brought up time and time again by various leaders, how do you think that has contributed to the kind of politics we're seeing today in the country? Kenya has been in the front line of the climate agenda, in part because of where it finds itself. In fact, part of the challenge that much of the Horn of Africa is actually facing, including food shortage and drought and famine, is directly attributed to climate change. Of course, a situation that has been exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine. And therefore, this is a very critical issue for Kenya. However, it's also important to note that even as they grapple with the challenge of climate change is already fueling conflict and instability across the region, in part because of the competition over scarce resources, over water, and others. Communities are being destabilized as a result of climate change, and it's an issue that we hope that the next administration is going to continue maintaining that kind of leadership, so that not just Africa, but the rest of the world can come to understand the criticality of saving the climate for generations that actually live in these countries. Is there anything you think the viewer does not know that they should know about this Kenyan election? One thing that I think is going to be important to underscore is, Kenya is not just, like any other country of the continent. It is a country that has a lot of influence. And therefore, if this election, for instance, is conducted in a way that is democratic and peaceful, and the result is not going to be contested, is going not only to have a ripple effect on the larger Horn of Africa, but in places such as West Africa, which have actually seen declining democracy and democratic credentials. And so this is a test, not just for Kenya, it's a test for the continent's ability to be able to develop itself democratically. All right, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us on Focus in Africa. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Now, let's take you to Kisumu, because over the last few years, the outgoing administration has embarked on several major infrastructure projects in the western region of the country. Key among the projects is the rehabilitation and the upgrading of the Kisumu port on the shores of Lake Victoria. The BBC's Roncliffe Audit reports from Kisumu.
Workers are putting final touches to the new Kisumu port. It is one of the major projects undertaken by President Uhuru Kenyatta and a legacy of his 10 years in office. The port, together with the refurbished railway line and the beautification of the city, are some of the major infrastructure projects that have been carried out in the last 5 years. And political leaders here say it is a major achievement.
It's only when you're in a formal place that you can sit down with your fellow traders and say, what is it that we want our government to do for us? For example, the area of sanitation or water provision. Then collectively, you can be serviced by the county government with those services.
But in the suburbs, a different scenario welcomes you. Residents here continue with their normal lives of poverty, poor living conditions, and lack of job opportunities.
Those projects are only helping the people in town. Myself, I live in the slums, and I can't see any benefit from the projects because my son finished high school and has been looking for a job at the port, even just a casual job for one day, but has never been successful. When you talk of business, maybe the people who go to town to do their business are benefiting, but not us. I am a tailor and I repair clothes instead of making full dresses. I am only left with repairing clothes because here there is no money.
In addition, some residents say these infrastructure projects have tampered with their source of livelihood. Informal vendors were moved away from their areas of business to create way for the new project.
I preferred to do my business at the stage. They should have let us do our business there. After they demolished, I lost all my clients. I used to sell and get my money. We have roads here in Nyalenda that have not been carpeted. At least they should have come and fixed them, because Nyalenda looks like a slum.
It is an opinion that some economic experts feel has some truth in it.
When
they were made to move, they were never offered alternative places to settle. For that reason, they suffered so much, and I'm not worried at all. People in this region will vote.
But despite all the challenges, residents of Kisumu, like those from other parts of the country, have a great desire to come out on 9th August and vote for their preferred leaders. Roncliffe Odit, BBC, Kisumu, Kenya.
Well, still to come on the program, Peter will be here with all the sports news, updates from the Commonwealth Games, and a look ahead this weekend's Premier League matches. You are watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's now take you straight to Birmingham, where the BBC's Peter Okwoche is standing by. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. Welcome to Birmingham. We're back at Victoria Square, the fan zone there, where fans are watching all the action on a big screen. Most eyes here today were on Nigeria's Tobi Amusan, who's the world record holder and world champion, of course, in the 100 meter hurdle for the women. You remember that blistering record she set in Eugene, Oregon about 2 weeks ago? Well, she breezed through her qualifying heat with the fastest time of the day, so one to look forward to. I must say she looks quite unstoppable. Tonight, watch out for Kenya's Jackie Chepkoech as well as Uganda's Peruth Chemutai. They're both taking part in the final of the women's 3,000 meters steeplechase in just over 2 hours. Uganda's Aaron Atoli alongside Dubem Amene and Sikiru Adeyemi, both of Nigeria, are running in the semi-finals of the men's 400 meters. That race coming up in about 3 hours' time. Now, last night was a really good night for Nigeria as a powerlifter Folashade Oluwafemiayo produced a massive result in the women's heavyweight final, breaking her own record by lifting 155 kilograms to win gold, as she was joined on the podium by fellow Nigerian Bose Omolayo, who won bronze. Goodness Nwachukwu won gold in the women's para discus. She broke the world record with a winning throw of 36.56 meters. Kenya's Helen Wawira won bronze in the women's lightweight powerlifting. Elsewhere in the men's T100, gold went to South Africa's Ndodozmi Ntutu. The T100 is for athletes with visual impairments, and Ntutu defended the title he won back at the Gold Coast. In the boxing ring, Ghana's Abraham Mensah is guaranteed a bronze medal after qualifying for the semi-final of the men's bantamweight bout. He'll be fighting Wales' Owain Allen on Saturday. Meanwhile, Kenya's Ferdinand Omonyala is still basking in that victory in the men's 100 meters on Wednesday night. He's had a pretty tough couple of weeks. Remember, he had visa problems, and which meant that he only arrived for the World Championships in Eugene, Oregon, with 2 hours to go before his race. So how does it feel to win this one?
It feels great. Anybody would love to have this. There were like 80 athletes who wanted this, and I'm the one who took it. So it's a great feeling, and it shows that the hard work we've been putting in has finally paid off. I'm representing around 50 million Kenyans back then, and I'm glad that I delivered a goal for them. And it's nice, and yeah, it's always nice to represent your country. Yeah.
And get gold.
And get gold. and doing something that nobody believed Kenyans could do, something really exciting, to do something different. And I'm just loving the process.
That's the men's 100 meters Commonwealth champion, Ferdinand Omonyala. And so the medal table has changed a bit, a lot more gold medals on the table. This is what Africa's mini table looks like now. South Africa still top with 7 gold, 7 silver and 8 bronze medals. Those 2 wins last night bring Nigeria up to 5 gold medals, 3 silver and 5 bronze medals, with Uganda still on 2 gold medals, both won in the men's marathon and the 10,000 meters. Now, the other big sports story for the weekend, of course, is the return of the Premier League. It kicks off later this evening with Arsenal travelling to Crystal Palace, but there are other games to be played at the weekend as well. Last season's runners-up are at newly promoted Fulham on Saturday. Nottingham Forest back in the Premier League for the first time since the 1998-99 season are at Newcastle, while defending champions Manchester City are away at West Ham on Sunday. And the City manager Pep Guardiola says defending the title this season will be a very tough task.
I had the feeling every time we start the press conference here, and I had the feeling that last year this season is harder. And when I say that, so next season cannot be harder, and it's harder. So yeah, definitely everyone wanna get in better. Every club, every owner have desires and invest, and yeah, everyone now realize on that, not just one team. So many teams do it and do it well, and the quality is there. The managers are exceptional, and that's why it's so exciting, and that's why Premier League is the best.
City manager Pep Guardiola there. Now, a lot of action to look forward to at this over the weekend here at the Commonwealth Games. We've got the women's long jump final, 2 Nigerians and a Kenyan taking part in that one. But of course, the race a lot of people can't wait to see is the final of the women's 100 meter hurdles, which takes place on Sunday, and a lot of people will be looking to see whether Nigeria's Tobi Amusan will be able to live up to the hype that she's creating here at these games. So definitely Africa will be amassing a few more medals before these games are over on Monday, and come Monday we'll be here to bring you all the final medal table for Africa from this competition. Remember that you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Okwoche, but for now, from me, Peter Okwoche in Birmingham, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching Focus on Africa. See you again very soon. Goodbye.